Right, how you all doing? This is part 2 of my Sega Saturn collection review opinion. So the next thing I'm going to cover is the Sega Saturn controller. And this is it right here. This is the Model 2 Sega Saturn controller. And I like it, it's very comfortable. It has 6 buttons, D-pad, start button, 2 shoulder buttons. And it's perfect for playing old school arcade games. Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter Alpha 2, Guardian Heroes. It's perfect for it, you know. But it's awesome. The wire is nice and long and thick, and it's very comfortable to hold, you know. And this is the plug that goes into the Sega Saturn, you know. Very, very unique, and it makes a clicking sound when you put it in, which is very satisfying. So yeah, the Sega Saturn controller. This is the Model 2. This is the one would recommend. It's the most comfortable. There's a Model 1, and that's sort of shaped like a stealth bomber look, sort of thing. This is the best one. Now, the Japanese Model 2 Sega Saturn is white, and the buttons are coloured, like, you know. The buttons are A, B, C, X, Y, Z, you know. So it's pretty cool, and the D-pad is awesome on this controller. So yeah, I mean, the Sega Saturn had loads of controllers, you know. It had a 3D analog controller that came out with Nights into Dreams. Nights into Dreams is an awesome game. Would highly recommend getting Nights into Dreams. There was light guns for Virtua Cop. Virtua Cop 1 and 2, awesome games, so would highly recommend them as well. But if you are going to get the light gun, you have to have an old school tube style television, because light guns just won't work on flat screen TVs or modern HD TVs. So just keep that in mind if you are going to get a Sega Saturn with a light gun to play Virtua Cop or House of the Dead. House of the Dead is another awesome game. There's so many awesome games on the Sega Saturn, would highly recommend it. So yeah, but if you are going to get a light gun, make sure you have an old school TV, because it won't work with a modern TV. So yeah. So we'll go on to the history of the Sega Saturn and why it was introduced. You know, the main reason is sorry. Well, the Sega Saturn came out 94 in Japan, 1995 everywhere else. It was discontinued in 98. It was a failure. It didn't sell well, and it was just a big disappointment for Sega, you know, and it forced Sega really out of the hardware industry. Now, the Sega Dreamcast was an awesome console, and that was Sega's last console that they made. But the Sega Saturn is the one that really killed Sega, you know. Now, Sega are to blame for the Sega Saturn's failure, and for them as a company, because they were fucking idiots in charge of Sega. Just had no idea what they were doing, and just shot themselves in the head, literally. You know what I mean? Bad management, bad decisions, just terrible decisions. Well, the first problem with the Sega Saturn, it was 100 quid more expensive than the Sony PlayStation. That was the first mistake. Second, it couldn't do 3D games as good as the Sony PlayStation. So, like, you know, like Wipeout, Destruction Derby, Doom, Tekken, all these awesome games on the Sony PlayStation. And the Sega Saturn paled in comparison. It just did. Like, on the Sega Saturn, you had Virtua Fighter, Daytona USA, you know, Blackfire, Bug. These games just didn't impress, you know, because the Sega Saturn struggled at doing 3D. So the arcade version of Virtua Fighter was far superior and ran better than the Sega Saturn version. Same as Daytona in the USA. So if you're going to launch a console, the launch games have to be great to impress people, and they weren't, and that was the thing. So the Sega Saturn had a bad launch lineup of games. It was more expensive, and it was harder to program games for the Sega Saturn because of these two central processor units in the system. Whereas the Sony PlayStation only had one, making it easier for developers to make games for. And the Sega Saturn, it rendered stuff in the quadrilaterals, whereas the Sony PlayStation rendered its graphics in triangles. It was much easier to render games and was faster and easier for developers. So the Sega Saturn was harder to program for, it was more expensive, and it just had a bad game launch lineup. You know, but the Sega Saturn was a 2D powerhouse, had awesome sound, you know, and there are some later on developers were able to release better 3D capable games, but a lot of hard work had to go into it, and a lot of developers wouldn't do it because they didn't see the point of it, because not many people had a Sega Saturn and it was more expensive, so what's the point? But some developers did. We'll get into that now in a minute with the developers, but Sega are the main reason, right? See, the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn were meant to come out in September of 1995, around the same time, a week between each other, right? I think the Sega Saturn was meant to come out first, the 9th of September, I believe, and then a week later, the Sony PlayStation. I'm not sure, but they were both meant to come out in September of 1995. Well, it was to be released in North America and then Europe. It was already out in '94 in Japan. So, Sega knew the Sony PlayStation was going to be awesome and was able going to put out far better games, 3D games. You know, now because Sony did everything right with the PlayStation. They showed people with demos, advertisements, what the system was going to be capable of, and it was only going to cost $400, right? Whereas Sega knew they fucked up, and like I said, they threw in a second processor at the last minute to enable the Saturn to do 3D rendering and graphics. It can do, it's just not as good. So Sega said, what are we going to do? How are we going to combat the PlayStation? How are we going to beat it in sales? How are we going to take #1 spot in video games? You know, because they felt threatened by the PlayStation, rightfully so. You know, so what they decided to do was release it 4 months ahead of schedule in June of 1995, the E3 Expo. This is the first E3 Expo, I believe, in June of 1995. So they released it 4 months ahead of schedule. You know, sorry, May, I should say, May of 1995. Right, going into E3, yeah, it was May, yeah. They were 4 months ahead of schedule, and they didn't tell anyone that they were doing this. You know, they just decided to release a surprise launch. You know, so developers were pissed off because they thought they had 4 months to develop a game. But Sega all of a sudden says, look, you had to have your games in next week. So a lot of games ran poorly because they weren't fully optimized because they had to be rushed. And a lot of developers were totally pissed off at Sega, saying, fuck yous, no. You know what I mean? And they just decided to cancel their games for the Sega Saturn and release them on the Sony PlayStation. So a lot of exclusive games that were meant to come out on the Sega Saturn ended up on the Sony PlayStation. Well, this surprise launch pissed off everybody. It wasn't just game developers. Shops, retail stores refused to sell the Sega Saturn because they said, look, the Sega would arrive at Walmart or one of them big American chain stores of Toys R Us with truckloads of Sega Saturn stuff, and they say, hey, we want us to sell this in their store. And I say, Well, most of them said no because we don't have the floor space for it and we don't have the shelf space for it because you didn't inform us of what you were going to do. So no, most of them said no, we're not prepared to sell it. Some stores wouldn't even sell the Sega Saturn because see, Sega had a pretty fucking crap, shady history with the Mega CD and the Sega 32X. These two add-ons, these two pieces of shit add-ons for the Sega Mega Drive slash Genesis were fucking terrible. Oh, and they didn't sell well. So Sega already had a bad history with developers and gamers, you know, because of releasing the Mega CD or the Sega CD as is in the States and the Sega 32X. They didn't support them and they didn't last that long. So gamers felt burned and developers wouldn't sell it. Oh, well. Now I probably should be eating during the video, but I'm just an amateur, you know. So anyway, yeah, so like, this, you know, didn't help the Sega Saturn at all. It didn't help Sega. So you have pissed off the game developers, pissed off retailers, and pissed off gamers. So that was 3 strikes basically, and you're out. You know, before the system even launched, you know, it was already fucking finished. You know, because the gamers and people in general don't forget, and it's the gamers in particular that you have to impress because they're the ones that are gonna pay the money and give you your fucking wages, right? And if they're not gonna spend the money on the Saturn, and that's exactly what happened. Where Sony did everything right, they went to retail stores months in advance, informing them what they're going to do every step of the way, and they said to certain shops, "Hey, look, your shop is a great shop." Buttering them up, making the retailers feel good about themselves, and say, "Hey, we'll give you a 50% of every PlayStation we sell, or 20%, or whatever it was." You know, and yeah, no problem. But Sega didn't do that. Sega just decided to show up unexpectedly with truckloads of Sega Saturn stuff and just expecting them to sell it anyway. So that all that fucking back for it. Right? So it came out May 1995, 4 months ahead of schedule. Games cancelled, games that were rushed. There's $100 more expensive than the Sony PlayStation. Right? But Sega thought like we'd have a 4 month head start. So by the time the Sony PlayStation comes out in September, we'd be top dog. That didn't happen. Right? Within that whole 4 month span, they only sold like what, 1 million units. You know what I mean? In 4 months, which is pretty fucking terrible. Where Sony in its first week made over well over 2 million. So there you go. Oh, brain dead, bastard Sega. You know, instead of being unified as a company with one direction in mind, one goal, that didn't happen. You had Sega of Japan, Sega of America, Sega of Europe. They all had their own plans and schemes, and one was trying to outdo the other with their own ideas, their own concepts. Instead of being unified, like Sony was, like Nintendo was, they weren't. It was complete disarray and madness. You know, it's a miracle how Sega survived at all, really. So, you know, so that's so the Sega Saturn came out in '95. It was discontinued in '98. Massive failure, but a lot of great games came out with the Sega Saturn. Loads of great games, and we have over 70 games or something like that. So it's gonna take me a while to go over all of them. So it's gonna be like it's gonna be more parts to this Sega Saturn video. You know, like I said, there are some good 3D games on the Sega Saturn, but not that many. And the Sony PlayStation just had better games and it was cheaper. Well, at the end of the day, it's all about opinion. A lot of people prefer the Sega Saturn over the Sony PlayStation, despite the PlayStation having better games and stuff. That's people's opinions. It's just the majority rules, and the majority chose the Sony PlayStation, and that's why it won. That's just the way it goes, unfortunately. Like, there's more games on the Sega Saturn that I like more than on the Sony PlayStation. That's my opinion. You know, I actually got my Sega Saturn before I got my Sony PlayStation. Back in '95, we chose to get a Sega Saturn. You know, I said, no, that's the system I want because I love Sega games. Outrun, Afterburner, all of which are awesome on the Sega Saturn. Power Drift, House of the Dead, Virtua Cop, Virtua Fighter 2. The Panzer Dragoon games are fucking awesome. Exhumed, you know, brilliant first person shooter. You know, Guardian Heroes, awesome. You know, fucking Manx TT Superbike, Sega Rally. You know, so many awesome games in the arcade, and these were coming out on the Sega Saturn. Now, like I said, the first launch games, Daytona USA, were rushed, but after that, they re-released Daytona USA as a Championship Circuit Edition. That was perfect, and Virtua Fighter 2 was perfect. It's just that the initial launch games were rushed to market because Sega decided to release the system format ahead of schedule. If you wonder what I'm eating, sausage rolls from Tesco, Tesco brand sausage rolls. Fucking awesome, I love them. If you read that sort of stuff. Club Orange. Love it. I know I shouldn't be doing this when I'm making a video, but I don't have a whole lot of time. I'm multitasking here. So yeah, the Sega Saturn failed, unfortunately. So I think that's it for the history of the system. And we got mine in '95. I got it at Virgin Megastar shopping town in Ireland. That's long gone. And I got it with I got the Model 2 European Sega Saturn, which is all black. With that controller, I got it with this controller, and I got it with Virtua Fighter 2. And that cost me something like $770, which was a lot of money. I had to save up big time, and my mum gave me the rest for Christmas. I got a Christmas time, 1995, and I have no regrets about that. Now at the time, my friends, everyone was saying to me, "Don't get a Sega Saturn, get a Sony PlayStation." I'm the only one out of my friends actually got a Sega Saturn in '95. Everyone got a Sony PlayStation. Because not a whole lot of people knew about the Sega Saturn because there was very little advertisements. Whereas Sony was everywhere. Everywhere, you know what I mean? Where on buses, bus stops, cinemas, everywhere. The only way you'd know about Sega Saturn is if you got Sega Saturn magazine or if someone told you about it. So not a lot of people knew about it, but the people that did know about it said, fuck it. It's more expensive and the games just aren't as good, which was the truth. But we had faith in Sega because I love Sega games. I knew that eventually good games would come out, and I was right, you know. And so yeah, we have no regrets about it. It's more reliable than the Sony PlayStation in my experience, you know. We've got 5 Sega Saturns. I know it's insane, but I know someone that has like every single version of the Sega Saturn, the Hitachi version, the JVC version. There's even a skeleton version where the case, the plastic case is see through. You can see through it. You can see the circuit board and everything else, motherboard. You know, there's even a Sonic the Hedgehog version which is really expensive. It has a Sonic the Hedgehog on it thing. And that's another problem with the Sega Saturn, right? It didn't have a true Sonic the Hedgehog game, which is sacrilege. I mean, for a Sega console not to have a true Sonic the Hedgehog game. But there was one plan called Sonic Extreme, but that was cancelled because Night into Dreams Sonic team made that game, and I believe the developer of it died. But like, so maybe that's why it was cancelled. But they should have released it anyway. But I don't know why they didn't. So all you have on the Sega Saturn when it comes to Sonic games is Sonic R, which is a Sonic racing game, which isn't that great. That was going up against Mario Kart on the N64. This wasn't as good. And you had Sonic Jam, which was just Sonic 2 and Sonic and Knuckles. And I had a small 3D world where you just run around getting rings. So just to give you an idea what Sonic Extreme could look like in a 3D world, which was awesome. It's a shame that wasn't a fully fledged game in Sonic Jam. It was just like a small little world where you run around getting rings and all that. So it really didn't help the Sega Saturn much. Whereas the N64 had Super Mario 64, you know, and Crash Bandicoot on the Sony PlayStation. No. Well, also, like, another big reason why Sega failed, Barry Stoller, who was the president of Sega of America, was a complete arsehole and dickhead. Like, he's the one that really fucking put the nails in the fucking coffin. Was he said, don't release RPG games here in North America because gamers won't read them or understand them. What fucking idiot? This is a fucking bonehead. Right? That makes no sense. Right? So not many RPGs came out in North America. Now, thanks to the actual replay cartridge, you can get these games out in Japan, but they're all in Japanese, so you have to read Japanese text and be able to understand Japanese, which is terrible. So he made that decision. No, don't bring them over here. Folks over here won't like them. Fucking idiot. Well, sorry. Fucking terrible. So no RPGs, despite the fact that Final Fantasy VII was coming out on the Sony PlayStation, and this game was epic, amazing. Western people love RPGs. Now, me in particular, I don't like RPG games that much, but I can understand why people do like them. Stories, epic adventures, characters. Final Fantasy VII was a blockbuster video game. It made the Sony PlayStation millions, and it really got the Sony PlayStation known. Final Fantasy VII, but Brainstone says no, we don't want that like that. Now, Panzer Dragoon Saga is an RPG game which is fucking awesome. Now, it's not as good as Final Fantasy VII, but it's the best RPG you're gonna get on the Sega Saturn, and it's really expensive. But like I said, I don't really like RPG games, so I don't really care that much. I was into Resident Evil, Doom, Tomb Raider, Wipeout, Tekken, them sort of games. Games that don't require too much thinking, I guess. So I don't know. Well, well, so Sega Japan are the head honchos. They decide what's gonna happen, right? So they said to Barry Stoller, right, we're gonna start working on the Sega Dreamcast. We'll just let the Sega Saturn slowly do it, and then we release the Dreamcast. Don't say anything to anybody if you're asked questions about the Sega Saturn. Just let us slowly do it, and we want the Sega Dreamcast in 1999, right? So this fucking stupid cunt Bernie Stoller was interviewed, and the guy asked him a question, what's the future of the Sega Saturn? And he said, we've got no plans for the Sega Saturn, we're finished with it, we're actually working on the Sega Dreamcast. So your man said, really, you're really finished with the Sega Saturn? It's not even out 2 years and you're finished with it? Really? He said, yeah. So fuck it. So after hearing that, Lee Kevin says, where the fuck will I get a Sega Saturn? It's only out 2 years and you're fucking giving up on the console. So after that statement, that's it. Developer says, we're not making any more fucking games. What's the point? And people stop buying it. So this cunt Bernie Stoller really put the final nail in the coffin. You know, do me easy. Fucking easy. You know, fucking, just shame. Because, like I said, like, fucking hell, like, the Sega Saturn is an awesome console. Great features, great games, and Sega and this cunt Bernie Stoller just killed it. And they killed Sega as a company. Sega is still around, but they're a shell of their former selves, and I hope that Sega get back to top tier gaming. But will it happen? I don't know. Just like Atari, Sega, I love Sega as well. And, Sega really fucked up big time in comparison to Atari, I guess. It's not a matter of opinion. But Sega really fucked up there. And, okay, the Sega Dreamcast came out in 1999 and it was a huge success, but at the end of the day, Sega just lost so much money in the Sega Saturn. Like $160 million they lost. Because, and they had to lay off a lot of their workforce. The people actually assemble the fucking Sega Saturns in their factories because they weren't getting money. So, loads of people lost their jobs, and this thing just really was a fucking nightmare for Sega and everyone involved. It's a shame, but they've no one to blame but themselves. So, sorry if it was eating during that video and all that. But, yeah, I mean, I'm hungry and multitasking because I don't have a lot of time on my hands. Well, well, so that's it for the history of the Sega Saturn. I can't think of anything else to say about it. Yeah, I'm gonna go over the next. It's not that a while. I'm gonna have to do another part of this Sega Saturn stuff because I've got over 70 games and it's gonna take a while. So so that's the end of this part. Sorry I was eating and drinking, but look at hell, I'm multitasking. I don't have a lot of time on my hands. So I'm going to go over the games now in a minute. So I'm going to end this particular part, and I'll talk to you all later. Right? So thanks very much for watching if you're watching, and if you are thinking about getting a Sega Saturn, I say yeah, get one. There's so many great games on it. Yeah, get it. So that's the end of this particular this part, and I'll go on to the games now in a minute. So thanks very much for watching. If you want to subscribe or comment, go ahead. So I'm John Field, and I'll see you all later. Take care, bye bye.